there are plenty of defendants across the country facing serious felony charges from the summer 2020 protests. According to data from the Prosecution Project, a group that tracks cases of political violence across the U.S., there have been 1,284 felony cases brought in connection with the summer 2020 protests. To date, a minimum of 162 of those cases have resulted in either no contest or guilty pleas and verdicts. And so far, at least 43 of those cases are known to have resulted in jail or prison time for the defendants. In at least 6 of those cases, the defendants received sentences of 5 years or more. And in 21 of the cases, the sentence has been at least 2 years. Now, compare that with the January 6 cases. Just one defendant has gotten a sentence in excess of 5 years, and only 6 have gotten 2 years or more behind bars. Now, this is not apples to apples, and it is not really fair to compare the two because the facts, the jurisdictions, etc., are very different. But one federal judge who's ruling on January 6 cases has been making the comparison and suggesting that the summer rioters have been treated with kid gloves. Judge Trevor McFadden, a 2017 appointee to the court, has been notably lenient in his sentences of Capitol riot defendants who pleaded guilty. In 8 of the 10 cases he's ruled on thus far, McFadden has sentenced the defendant to less time than the government has recommended. In his rulings, he cited a belief that there's a double standard in how January 6 cases are being judged. Quote, "I know that the government believes that the January 6 cases are sui generis or unique," the judge has said, "and therefore can't be compared to other cases. But I don't agree." In another instance, Judge McFadden said, quote, "I think the U.S. attorney would have more credibility if it was even-handed in its concern about riots and mobs in this city," directly referencing the summer 2020 protests in Washington. Now, I think that would be a fair point if it's true. I happen to agree that people who just trespassed at the Capitol that day and did not engage in any property damage or physical assaults should not have the book thrown at them. So in certain cases, I agree with Judge McFadden for going below what prosecutors requested. But his argument that the unrest in Washington was largely ignored does not seem to be supported by the numbers. 641 people in D.C. I had to look this up and was really amazed at how many it was. 641 people in D.C. currently facing charges stemming from the summer 2020 protests. That's more than Minneapolis, Louisville, Seattle, or any other jurisdiction where there were protests. This is an important issue where we need facts and perspective, not politics. Because I don't want to see anyone who engaged in violence not prosecuted. I want to see them get tough sentences. And sure, I'd like them to see them be relatively equal, but let's talk to Tom Jackman about this. He's a reporter for the Washington Post. He's one of the few people in the country who has been closely following both the January 6th cases and the summer 2020 cases. Tom, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right. So first, let me ask you the big picture question, which is, can we make comparisons between what the January 6th rioters have been getting and what the summer 2020 protesters have been getting? And if so, generally, what do the numbers look like?
Well, you've got 750 people arrested for January 6th so far. We've only had about 130 sentenced out of that 750, maybe a little more than that now. 130 sentences. Of those 130, only 10 have been for felonies, 120 misdemeanors. And in fact, Judge McFadden has only had misdemeanor cases so far. And so I don't have a breakdown of how many. Your graphic pointed out how many felonies there were in Portland and in D.C. And I started looking through some of those cases, and they seem to be getting treated exactly the same in terms of, is the defendant have a record? Did they destroy anything? What was the damage done? It seems in terms of the prosecution approach, they seem similar. Now, the big difference between the protests of 2020 and January 6th is that the protesters on January 6th often filmed themselves and posted their videos, or they stood proudly as other people filmed them. I would say virtually every case I've seen has live images, not live, recorded images of people doing what they did at the Capitol on January 6th, which makes it a lot easier to prove, which is why, we only had one trial, and that was a trial of a guy. There were plenty of pictures of him standing at the Capitol, waving people in, and he was promptly convicted. Go ahead.
Your reporting showed that lawyers for some of the protesters, rioters from the summer, have complained that the January 6th rioters have gotten too favorable a treatment in terms of how they've been detained, et cetera.
Well, the D.C. jail is the D.C. jail, and it's not a country club, and they're bringing attention to that is helping everybody that ever is going to go through the D.C. jail in the future. But in terms of who's being held before trial, it's a very small number, about 50 or 60 right now. Same with the 2020 protesters. You're only held in jail for the really serious stuff, and if you're a danger to the community or a flight risk. So I feel like the government is taking a somewhat even-handed approach, and they are going after both groups with the same sort of, intensity. And they are getting, and as you pointed out, there's serious sentences being handed out for 2020. Serious sentences.
Yep. And I think that's really important. And I think that the only way to really make an apples-to-apples comparison is to talk about what the federal government is doing versus what the federal government is doing, right? Because you can't say, some state official did or didn't do X, Y, Z. Let's say some state official drops charges. Well, that state official, in my view, should be criticized if that person dropped charges against someone who committed violence. Fair enough.
Sure.
But the only sort of apples-to-apples comparison you can make is, what is the federal government doing when it comes to the summer 2020 in the federal cases, right? Ones that happen in D.C., et cetera, versus what happened in the Capitol riots. And everything's not equal. It's not that, it's got to be exactly the same because they're different sets of facts. But that is a fair way, is it not, to look at this and examine if justice is being meted out evenly?
I think so. And they're using some of the same charges. So a lot of times people are being charged with entering a restricted ground, and they're getting the same penalties. And I just looked at a case where a guy in 2020 burned a statue here in Washington, and he got 3 years probation because it was his first offense and he had cooperated. It's the same kind of thing that happens in the Jan 6 cases. Somebody, broke a wine bottle in the Capitol, and it's their first offense, they've been getting probation or a few days in jail. The majority of people getting sentenced so far, January 6th, are getting probation. And there have been only, as I mentioned, 10 felonies. Most people get probation. And most of the time, the vast majority of the time, the judges are going below the government's recommendation for sentencing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very fair to compare that to the 2020 protesters. And I think the 2020 people are getting the same thing.
Look, that should be a relief. I mean, we should be able to take politics out of this and say, you know what? Good thing that the real bad guys are getting prosecuted and they are getting real prison time. And good thing that the people who just engaged in more minor misdemeanors are not. On the whole, there are going to be individual cases where someone's going to highlight something and say this one was too tough or too light. But that's why we wanted to have you on, because you are one of the few people who's been looking at this from a macro perspective in following all of the cases together. So, Tom Jackman, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.